Now that Netflix's Three Body Problem has been out for a while, it's time to look at some of the burning questions it left us asking. Ya reached the end of her story, the Santee are coming to Earth, and the Wallfacer project is underway. Overall, the first season wrapped things up fairly neatly, while also leaving us with much to think about. The first big question is if there will even be a second season. Over the last few years, Netflix has developed a reputation for canceling some of their more thought-provoking titles when the initial watch time and series completion numbers don't hit their internal benchmarks. That gave me some concern in the first week the show was out. But to me, it looks like beyond that the numbers have been good enough, so I'm expecting that it will be renewed. I could definitely be wrong, but as I or anyone else who read these books would tell you, things really pick up in the second one. Part of my confidence is related to that. If you've already optioned the whole series and pulled off a difficult and expensive first season, you're leaving a lot of potential on the table if you stop there. And before we get into the other questions, I mentioned that I'm a fan of the book series. I know how the story ends, and I know the answers to many of the questions I'm going to bring up today. But I will try not to tip my hand or give away any big plot spoilers, because I enjoyed the experience of trying to work through these mysteries when I was first exposed to them, and think you should have that opportunity too. If you watched my season 1 ending video, then you'll know I pointed out the meaning of Ya's joke as an important question to think about before season 2 gets here. In the comments of that video, I got some pretty promising guesses, though I haven't seen anyone who got it right. And I don't know if it's possible if you don't already know what she's trying to convey. The first season is Ya's story. She's the person who pushed the button, revealing our location. Her motivation makes sense even if you don't agree with what she did, which is important since she got the warning from the pacifist Santee and decided to do it anyway. And by the time she returns to Red Coast Base in the final episode to end her life, she realizes she made a mistake. That last meeting with Saul was the one thing she set up and followed through with before she left. It was her final act. When she was contemplating the call, she looked at 2 books, one on game theory and one on the Fermi paradox. Game theory is just what it sounds like, and if you aren't familiar with it, the Fermi paradox is about why we don't have conclusive evidence of other advanced intelligent civilizations, even though the likelihood that they exist is extremely high. Like, it's almost impossible to imagine that they don't exist. She uses the format of a joke to further obscure the true meaning of what she tells him. In that, Einstein dies and goes to heaven. He has his violin and is excited to play. While he's tuning that, the angels rush in telling him he shouldn't play because God won't like it. And they mention that he's a saxophonist. Not playing is difficult, and later when he hears God playing Take the A Train, he decides to join in. Just as the angels promised, God doesn't like this. He stops playing, appears, and kicks Einstein in the balls before smashing his violin. Heaven has become hell for Einstein, and the angels return to say that they warned him, never play with God. Yeah, then adds that humor is a very personal thing. Some jokes are so private they only make sense to 2 people. Some people understand it, and some people don't, but jokes are important. She says we wouldn't survive without them. So obviously she's trying to pass a message on, and the contents of this conversation were enough to make the Santee want to kill Saul. I think the show tells us that she picked him because of the way he analyzed the situation when she asked him about the universe winking. At least part of the reason they sent Tatiana to kill her at the end of the season was what Mike Evans told them about her being fearless. So she had their attention, and by talking to him, passed that on. In the joke, there are 3 different entities: Einstein, the angels, and God. In our understanding of heaven, we picture angels serving God. But in the joke, they also warn Einstein to try to protect him. When he doesn't follow their advice, he loses his beloved violin and ability to play music, turning heaven into hell. So there are a lot of context clues to back up what she's trying to get across there. But if you can't quite grasp it, I think that's totally okay, because part of the point is that Saul doesn't grasp it yet either, which means that something else will probably have to happen before it'll start to fall into place for him. And speaking of Tatiana, in the finale, she receives one of the gaming headsets and a card that says, if one of us survives, we all survive. Obviously, she was instrumental in facilitating the game and was there for the face-to-face meeting when Jin and Jack made it to level 4. She grew up around the organization, so her excitement from putting the headset on wouldn't be about playing the game. Not the same one that potential recruits played anyways. So the question here is, what are the Santee trying to show her? Why use the headset specifically when they've already used Sofon to show up at her house and talk to her through her TV? I thought Marlo Kelly's performance was one of the best of the first season, so I was glad to see her story continue. And it's nice that it provides a little bit of continuity from the Evans organization, that part of the story, because all of those characters are gone. No one on the Judgment Day will be returning for the new season, is what I'm trying to say. But I'm guessing that Augie will. She was still reeling from using her nanofibers to wipe all those cultists and their kids out. And that led to her quitting the Staircase Project, and the last time we saw her, she was in Mexico. She was trying to use her technology for good to balance the scales a little bit. The character she's based on only played a large part in the first book, but since they've changed this to being a group of people that are connected, I imagine the plan was always to keep her around. There were also hints of a potential romance between her and Saul. They certainly were closer in a way, and I don't know why you would include that or keep sort of going back to it if you weren't planning on going somewhere with it in the future. She left the Staircase Project because she didn't want to work for Wade, who was a character that managed to remain enigmatic even though we saw a lot of him. Does his background matter? How his strategic intelligence agency came to be? How he ended up in that position? Is any of that stuff important? Maybe the mystery is what defines the character. But with his interest in developing hibernation technology and his belief that he's the only one that can lead the project, I think it's safe to say he'll be around for a while. The Santee seem to agree, and they appear to have a healthy respect for him as an adversary. Sofon paying him a visit to say they're looking forward to meeting him and will have a place for him when they arrive. And then just stating that he's part of their plan is something to think about. As is the countdown he saw and the vision of his dead eyeless body. They also offer condolences for the Staircase Project and say they'd have liked to meet Will. The future of his brain is also a big question, because as Saul and Jin discussed, that thing is just essentially traveling through space forever. Space is big and it's empty, and when something starts moving, unless something stops it, it just keeps going. The fleet the Santee sent to Earth wouldn't likely be able to change its course in an effort to track it down. They're moving fast and probably don't have the resources to extend their trip. But 400 years is a long time, and a lot could happen. Unlike us, the Santee can continue to advance its technology as much as they normally would, working around chaotic eras. By the time their first fleet arrives, they might have something better on their homeworld. In relation to science, will the Earth figure out a way to work around the Sofons and advance its technology while they wait? There was a compelling case made that they wouldn't be able to, and it's hard to imagine what might change so that they would be able to reliably test new ideas. If the Sofons aren't enough to convince you we're way behind, a simple comparison of ship speeds might be a more tangible example. The Santee's current fleet will take 400 years to reach Earth, traveling at 1% of the speed of light. 1% doesn't sound that impressive, but if you look up how long it would take for us to travel to their planet using our current ships, you'll find out that it would take us tens of thousands of years. We actually go nowhere near 1% of the speed of light. The best hope humanity has is the Wallfacer Project. This is why Saul was thrust into the spotlight from a supporting role. Although at the end of the season he was still trying to refuse the position and the responsibility that comes with it. He did take that free flight to Florida to watch Will's brain get launched into space though, and is starting to realize that even if he says he's not a Wallfacer, they still have to act as if he is, since the whole point is that no one knows what he's planning inside his head. It gives him and the other Wallfacers carte blanche, or at least within reason, with the only real limitations being they're working with the resources of the entire planet in an effort to save humanity. So it'll be interesting to see what kinds of perks come along with that. Is he the right guy? Yeah, I seem to think so. And I think if you look back on the season, you can see why that is. His reluctance aside, in comparison to his brilliant friends, his intellect stood out. Beyond that, it's not clear what, if anything, his superpower is. But you would expect that something we learned about him will turn out to be it. He'll also have Da Xie, or Clarence, at his side. Wade made the joke that he was going to be handcuffed to Saul for the rest of his life, and that's probably not that far from the truth. Jin was just sort of hanging around at the end of the season. Most of what she'd been working toward fell apart. The project failed, she discovered her unrealized feelings for Will after he was gone, and it seemed like her relationship with Raj was over. He almost has to do something that doesn't involve the rest of the group in the second season. Go in a different direction. Still, the show has him connected with Wade, and unlike Jin, I imagine their relationship will continue. Wade will likely sleep through time, at least that was his stated plan, and this will also become an option for everyone else. It will be interesting to see how Jin refocuses her efforts, because even though she was with Saul at the end of the season, his wall-facer journey kind of requires him to be on his own for the most part. The idea of how they'll skip through time is also a big question. My favorite part of the setup is the long wait until the Santee actually arrive, and the way that that leads to the big changes over generations. But they do eventually have to arrive. That part is pretty important in an invasion story. We have a core group of familiar characters that we expect to play a part when that happens 400 years in the future. People don't live that long, so something's going to have to happen to make that all work out. And I guess the last big question is what is actually coming. It's hard not to wonder what this alien race on their way to at the very least take our home planet and possibly exterminate us might look like. To be clear, this is something the book never provides a direct answer for. Because they introduce the game first, and we learn about their situation that way, you tend to think of them as humans whenever they get to that part of the book that takes place on their planet. Plus, as humans, that's just what we do anyways. But in that chapter, there's a conspicuous lack of details that would serve as clues. We know they evolved on a planet trapped in the chaos inherent to their 3-star system. They adapted to that by being able to dehydrate themselves, and they communicate through their thoughts. That's pretty much it. The last part gives them some characteristics similar to a hive mind, but it's important to note that they don't think as one mind. They're not a true hive mind. We saw that when the pacifist was able to warn Earth, which is something that it had to answer for because it's not like it's possible to keep it a secret. Sofon says we wouldn't like how they look. And while we'll probably never know for sure, I think there are quite a few context clues that hint that they might be bugs or at least insect-like. There is a 4th book that is semi-officially part of the series, but it was written by a fan. That situation is a little confusing because Cixin Liu allowed it to be published, like he gave it his blessing, but as far as I can tell, he didn't have any input on the conclusions the writer came to. And there was also a period of time where he thought he was dying of cancer, so that complicates things a little bit too. In that, they're described as bugs, but I think that is primarily because that was the most popular theory at the time. As I mentioned, this is written by fans, so a lot of people came to that conclusion. Will the show go that extra step and show them on screen? I kind of hope not. The mystery is in some ways preferable, but we'll have to wait and see. And I think that is a great place to leave things. Hopefully they'll be given another season. Hopefully we'll be able to see the rest of this story play out. I'm very curious to hear what your questions were at the end of the first season, especially if you didn't read the books. So let me know about those in the comments. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.